here to like introduce you, Vitalik Buterin. Always weird to actually introduce you, but you are the co-founder of Ethereum. And today we have Dieter Shirley with you. Dieter is the co-founder of Flow. You are also the co-founder of CryptoKitty. You also wrote the ERC 21 back in time. So very pleased to have you. And yeah, I'm just here to set a little bit of context and also maybe start with one question for you both. And then you are free to chat, or I can also have like more questions for you. So today at the Edge Lana Hackathon, builders are invited to work on the decentralized social track. This focus on DeSoc made perfect sense. Once because we have watched digital communities such as the CryptoKitty communities. Really, like it was 7 years ago. There was a community that was sharing like common aesthetics, chatting, and having like really like a very social dynamic. And so here we are now, 7 years ago, 7 years after, in real life in the pop-up city. So that mean that like the pop-up cities are here, are real, and we are all here also for, I guess, looking for new social apps that can better suited to our specific mode of interactions altogether. And also this DeSoc track makes perfect sense because yes, we are somehow like around 24 hours post US elections. And that reminds us that, once again, social media has a very profound impact on our words and the order of our words and how we are interacting with each other. So that being said, for the context, I have a question to both of you. What kind of decentralized social app could we build to promote pro-social collaboration, synergy, and community dynamics? Who would like to start? Maybe Vitalik, you would like to start?
What kind of pro-social app could we build? I mean, I feel like there isn't like one magic all-encompassing solution answer to this, right? I think there's two parts to the question. One is like what are like decisions that can be made within social apps to make them more pro-social, and then the other question is how do you make something that can like actually take off and succeed, right? Because I think one of the challenges that we have is basically like everyone is trying to make the next Twitter, right? But then Twitter was not trying to be the next Facebook, TikTok was not trying to be the next Twitter, Facebook was not trying to be the next MySpace, and so on, right? And so I think there's this like open question of like what even is a different form factor that is like gives something that's interesting and exciting enough to people that they actually like really wants to participate and it catches on, right? And like I think like Farcaster and Lens do have like some set of features that are like interesting over top of Twitter, but there's this like open question of like how, like what actually would it take to really get over the hump, right? And I mean, one of the answers to this, of course, is to like actually build apps that are specifically designed around like collaboration for like projects, DAOs, or like teams. Though that's also a category that's not empty, right? Like things like Discord do exist there already, right? But I think like that's the kind of question that you want to ask, right? It's like, what is a new category of activity that you want to enable that like doesn't exist yet? And then as soon as you invent it, people just think like, wait, why didn't I think about this before? And then, yeah, I mean, on the question of how to make this more pro-social, right? I think the challenge that we have right now, right, is basically that there's like a lot of different incentive misalignments, right? Like there is, I mean, one is of course just the fact that like the content that both gets seen and get monetized the most is like content that wins popularity contests, and then like one part of that is that whole concept can get like gamed and attacked and so on. But then the second part is like even if it doesn't, that's not the mechanism that necessarily surfaces the best content, right? So like that's one of those questions to think about. The other one is, of course, that like the default way to win an attention economy is often to be polarizing, right? Because like basically, yeah, if people like what you say, then they retweet it. If people hate what they say, they either don't retweet it or they point and laugh at it. But then the point and laughing itself like makes more people more people see it, and then people might even point and laugh back at them, right? And so this question of like, can you create like explicit incentives to both like encourage more high quality content and more of like unifying rather than dividing, right? And like we saw Polis, right? And like Polis as like a very earnest effort and it gets used a lot, but then it's like Polis appeals to the superego, but it has nothing for the id, right? Like that's just kind of like one of my impressions. Like there's this like challenge, right, in like creating things that actually, like really, work well for like all of the different parts of human nature, right? Like they're both like actually, good in terms of what things they promote and like they're actually things that people want to participate in. So, I don't know, like to me, it feels like this complicated problem that has a lot of different moving parts to it.
Yeah, obviously there's no quick answer to something like that. I think to hone in on the pro-social aspect that you're talking about, I think that the reason why we're seeing these communities fracture so much is in part what Vitalik was saying about, you know, the most divisive content is the one that sort of gets the strongest reaction from people. But it's also just the echo chamber effect, where people end up being aligned with people who already think like them, and it lets us forget that some of the people who aren't in that echo chamber with us are also humans, and have complex and they have their own lives, they have complex ideas, and it's never as simple. I think there was an amazing Twitter account. I don't know if it still exists, but it's called, I think, I Am a Voter or something like that, very simple. And what it is it literally just randomly samples people that have gone through like polling, like the what's it called, the exit poll, who've gone through the exit poll, and they're asked questions like, are you conservative or are you liberal, or are you pro-abortion or are you anti-abortion, and all of these things, and it just posts these, it used to post these random samples from this, and it'd be wild, right? It would be like, oh, I'm a highly religious conservative person who supports abortion, right? Like, and it would just, it was such a good reminder that there is no one axis upon which we can separate humanity. That's a false dichotomy, and crazily enough, we find ourselves attracted to these platforms that try and impose that on us. And so for me, the biggest thing that we can do is try and recreate what used to be, whether it's, school, college for us when we were younger, whether it's, a workplace, maybe it's, the bar after work, but like just these places where we're sort of forced to confront people who have different ideas than us, and not just reject them as wrong, but to understand how they got to that point and understand the ways in which they're right and the ways in which they're just different from us because they have a different priority set. And so what does that look like? I mean, to Vitalik's point, if it was obvious, then we'd all be doing it, or it would already have happened. But I do think that having some sort of mechanism where there's a little bit more mixing and a little bit less segregation, I think is going to be an important part of that. And then another aspect, and I guess this is a little orthogonal to my first point, but one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is that we bundle together the data, right? The raw data of like who is, like all of the tweets that people are producing or all the Facebook posts that people are doing, and we separate that from, or we combine that with the recommendation algorithms. And if we could somehow disconnect those, and we could have a system that looks a lot like Mastodon in the sense that like everyone has access to all the data, but we had a little bit more control, whether that's by choosing different algorithms, choosing different, humans, curators, but just having a different way of surfacing the the content that's interesting to us that isn't predicated on getting us to doom scroll as long as possible in order to show us as many ads as possible. And exactly what that looks like, I'm not sure, but it would be really interesting if there was an app that literally at the end of showing you a bunch of tweets, instead of figuring out which ones you scroll past enough, but like, I don't know, it checked your heartbeat or used the camera to like determine whether or not you were angry or happy, and like tune the algorithm that way, as opposed to whether or not I felt the need to send it to my wife to just talk about how dumb so many other people are.
Very interesting. And so, do you think there is like in Edge, for instance, is there any like social dynamic that we could actually try to enhance maybe or foster through decentralized social apps?
Well, I think every app should be decentralized. I mean, at the end of the day, what we see is that whenever we have centralized social systems, that somebody ends up in control. And that person is inevitably going to have to make decisions that are not going to be in the best interests of everybody. And so I don't know what to say other than that, like, of course we need decentralized social applications, but we need all applications to be decentralized, because at the very least they end up being rent extractors and end up monetizing the efforts of others in increasingly providing a less valuable service while they're making ever more dollars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we're already starting to like see examples of like decentralizing, providing actual value in terms of breaking down some of those barriers. I mean, even like the different Farcaster clients, right? To me, is just like a live experiment of that kind of decentralization in action, right? Where if you dislike one client, you can switch to another, and you're still part of the same network effect, right? And that really, reduces the barriers to entry for people to come in and try to build something better. Another fun one I saw, I think, yesterday, right, was like there was I think a roll up that like shut down, I believe, yesterday, right? And because like it was stage 2 and it was like a proper roll up, L2Beat had written software, and like you could just go and use that software, and so users like basically have this like method that's completely independent of the original team to actually withdraw and take their money out, right? And like that is like one of the core value propositions of something being a layer 2 and like being a roll up instead of just like being on a server. And like we actually got a live demonstration of that playing out, which is also, I think, really amazing to see.
And so, a bit more technical question, probably. What kind of like tech primitive should we build, or should the developers today at the Edge Hackathon try to build in order to enable like decentralized social app adoption, also maybe better user experience also.
I mean, one I think about a lot, it exists, but it's just not, I think it could use a lot more attention, and that's IPFS. I think that when we're talking about social media in particular, there's a lot of data that is read-only. Like it's write once and then read-only, and IPFS is perfect for that. Now, IPFS is a transport protocol, not a storage protocol, and so we still have questions about where we store that data. But I think that there is a lot to be said for using these decentralized systems that are that don't necessarily require a coordination layer of a blockchain. And I think we forget about those protocols sometimes. And I think it'd be I think if anyone was looking to build something that had like a social utility like that, something, whether it's IPFS, which it has its problems, or something like that, I think we really should be aware that not everything needs to be a blockchain and not everything needs to be on a blockchain, even though lots of things can and should be on blockchains. I think that data distribution, basically the ability to easily create verifiable read replicas is something that I think is underappreciated and which IPFS has solved to a reasonable degree.
Yeah, and when the original like concept of Web3 came out, right? Gavin Wood came up with the term back in 2014. One of the interesting ideas there was that Web3 was supposed to represent this trifecta of three different technologies, right? Where Ethereum was only one of them. The other two were Whisper and Swarm, where Whisper is a like, decentralized protocol for basically passing messages that do not need consensus. And Whisper, and it's called Waku today, but it still exists, right? So that's been quietly progressing, and there's even some privacy protocols that are like actually starting to use it now. And then Swarm was basically meant to be decentralized storage, but also like plus a more sophisticated system for like incentives, having decentralized nodes that can do the storing. So IPFS does like a lot of that, but not all, right? It's like right now using IPFS requires these like pinning services, and in theory with Swarm it's supposed to be a fully decentralized thing. So that, but like it's that part's definitely making progress slowly, and I think it's definitely very true that there's a balance of different technologies for different kinds of needs for different pieces of content, right? Like a single tweet like appearing in the wrong order is like very different from like an account creation being reverted, right? So that's what also and like I think as we've seen, right, like there's a lot of hybrid architectures out there, right? Like with Farcaster, user account stuff happens on chain, and but then messages get broadcasted and stored in a totally separate but still decentralized data structure.
And do you think that the pop-up cities format should have his own decentralized app?
I mean, like ZooPass and ZooZagora and ZooZalur.city and like I guess you can continue extending the list, and like there's social layer and like this growing list of things, right? It's kind of meant to be that, right? But it's like you can't prescribe that from the beginning. We have to let people experiment and like figure out what actually satisfies people's needs.
Yeah, I think the most decentralized thing is that it doesn't have its own apps, but that people create apps for it, right? And I think to me, an area that I don't think that we think about enough, leverage enough in the blockchain space generally is composability, the permissionless interoperability, and I think something like this is an area where we can, we might be able to inspire or even incentivize that in this kind of community and say, look, we have an app that keeps track of who's met other people, right? But somebody else can create an app that like encourages you to go meet a friend of a friend, right? And if that data is open, and if that those linkages are open, then it can open up the creativity of other people to come in and say, well, all I have is the idea of one more feature, but that's okay because I can implement that feature as like a web page that just expands on the existing functionality, or as a smart contract that just leverages the existing data. And so I do think that I always think that at events like this, I think it would be so fun if there was just like a super simple trading game, right? Where, like everybody gets a pack of cards or stickers or, NFTs, obviously, at the beginning of the event. But they're all the same, right? Like all I have is, little kitties wearing hats, right? And what you have is a dog, blowing balloons. But then I get a collection at the end based on how many people I interact with. Like that could be a lot of fun. And I think it would encourage people to go and find, I talked to Ali and I see that he has this zebra, with shooting a rocket out of its butt. And I'm like, where did you get that one, right? And now I'm going to try and find the person who's got the zebra. And so I think that there's, it sounds silly, but I think, I think the point is that we often aren't silly enough, right? Like obviously I'm the CryptoKitty guy, so I'm maybe over index on the silliness, but like I feel so many of the attempts for us to create social platforms in the Web3 world are, here's a social platform and it's Web3, so you should care. Like make it more fun, make it more engaging, make it more silly. And I think You know, I think that that's something that we know vibes with this community.
You could talk about simplicity, not silliness.
Yeah, but that's the thing is I think that sometimes it is too simple, right? That there isn't that whimsy in it where it's very straightforward. And look, like so many of us are engineers and very was it left brain, right brain? It doesn't matter, but very like intellectually focused. But like we also want to have fun, right? Yeah. Like we're sitting next to a guy who has cats on his bags. We're all here because of a guy who likes cats on his bags. So I think we should try and find a lot more whimsy in what we're doing in this space.
I agree. So talking actually about user experience, I have one last question. I would say, like, how would you imagine, what would be actually your advice in terms of user experience to actually push people to build DSOC, but also push people to more adoptions of DSOC today?
I mean, adoption's a tough one. I think there's two problems, right? One is, you know, is the thing you're trying to get them to adopt interesting enough? And then what are the barriers to adoption? And I think ultimately you have to solve both. You know, we were very lucky with CryptoKitties to be able to solve that first one. There were a lot of people interested and excited about the cats. But what we found is that it was very difficult for people to get into that ecosystem. And you know, I think that the 3 weeks after CryptoKitties launched were, you know, some of the biggest, the largest number of Metamask installs in its history. Maybe it's been surpassed by now, but certainly for a long time. But by the same token, it was like, well, we were asking everybody to install Metamask, right? And like, there's a lot of good to be said about Metamask, but it's also, you know, we need other paths for people to come in. You know, obviously on Flow, we addressed, you know, the account model, and I know that Ethereum is looking at moving account abstraction into the protocol as well. I think that's a big thing that's going to help. I think expecting every single user to understand asymmetric cryptography is, you know, that's a great MVP, but I think ultimately in the long run, we'll be able to do better. But I think that you know, we can't attack the one problem without attacking the other problem. And I think whenever you think you're solving the one problem, make sure that the other problem isn't in your way. And in particular, make sure, I think it's really easy for us to think, oh, if only we made it easier, people would get excited about this. Well, there's stuff here that is exciting, but there's probably a lot of people out there that aren't excited by the same stuff as we are, and we have to find what's exciting for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, fully agree on all of those things. I think, you know, aligning incentives between, you know, the goals of decentralization and making systems that work for everyone, and just like people's desire to have fun is super important. One other like divide that I think is super important to figure out how to like do a good job of balancing is making something that appeals to like crypto and non-crypto users at the same time, and even something that appeals to non-crypto users without like sacrificing the point of being a crypto application, right? So it's like, you know, one extreme is basically you make an app, and then to install the app you have to already have Metamask, and then like your conversion goes down by a factor of like 5, or you tell me whatever the number is, right?
In 2017 it was like 100.
Okay, yeah. Then you know, the other approach is like one app per wallet, but then if you have like 100 apps, how are you even going to track the private keys, right? And I mean, this is where like Dan Finlay's work around you know, like accounts delegation, and like also a very similar approach adopted in Farcaster, like to me, like I really appreciate, right? Because it feels to me like the ideal approach is that if you don't already have a wallet, the app gives you a wallet. If you do have a wallet, you should be able to link it, and like that should be your like at least recovery route to like control your accounts. And like you should also be able to upgrade from you know, being a noob user to someone that does have that like a crypto wallet that backs everything up. So figuring like those abstractions out, I think, is going to be super useful. And I think one of the really nice things is like we have way more tools to do that than we ever did, right? Account abstraction standards, one, things like ZK email, like basically an Ethereum address becomes a universal interface, right? It's like how in Unix philosophy, text is the universal interface. Here, Ethereum address is the universal interface. Like it's an object that can represent any particular type of authority, right? And with ZK email, you basically have an Ethereum address that represents ownership of a particular email account, right? And so you have one structure that could be controlled by an email account, could be controlled by a private key that you personally have, could be controlled by a passkey, could be controlled by a multisig of 5 other things, could be controlled by a non-adhar, right? And the app theoretically doesn't even need to know. So like that's a super powerful level of composability, right? So I think also we need to just take a step, or not even a step back, a step forward, right? And appreciate just like all of these amazing things that have really only come online pretty much in the last year. And I think there's a lot of opportunities to make something that's like really provides top level decentralization and top level user experience at the same time.
Yeah, that is such a challenge, right? Like it's so hard to like we at Dapper, right? So after CryptoKitties, we started a company named Dapper, and we built NBA Top Shot, and like the hardest line for us to walk was this line between us really being genuinely committed to true ownership and making sure that people had control of their own assets, and literally the people coming and like signing up for accounts going, yeah, I lost my password, right? Like I need you to reset it for me. And it's a really tough line. And I think, I know that Metamask is looking at this, and Jeff over here is working on Flow Wallet, and we're looking at a bunch of different ways that we can create sort of, how do you let the user get that level of easiness, right? How do you make it super easy for the user until they understand that what they have is worth a lot, and then they start to correctly be afraid that that's just attached to an email address, right? But what I remember, a good friend of mine, he went and he bought a bunch of CryptoKitties, and he had such a great time, and then he lost his laptop, and we're like, well, do you have your 12 words from MetaMask? And he's like, well, I didn't know what those words were for. I just ignored them, right? Because he was so gutted because he loved those kitties, and he had spent a bunch of time collecting them, and no shortage of dollars collecting them as well. But at the time that he was asked to secure them, he didn't have them yet. And so figuring out how to flip that, right, to get to the point where, oh, now you have 10 kitties. Now I'm going to show you the 12 words. Now that you know why that matters, right? And I think it's a critical aspect to it. And we're trying to use on Flow. We're trying to make sure we can use like secure enclaves in phones, and make sure that we're letting people on board by creating an account with username and password, but then allow those accounts to be transferred, delegated. So that people can take true ownership of them once they understand what they're in for. But it's really a big ask before people have even, bought their first asset to tell them that you need to treat this like your life savings, because one day it might literally be.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have maybe 5 minutes for questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Hey guys, it's good seeing you again. We had a discussion yesterday about values in Ethereum, and it's not like we came to like a conclusion of what they were, but I was left wanting, and it's a quick question. Do you feel that Ethereum right now is pushing out a value statement or a value system that is sort of leading the market, or do you want that, or is it like your opinion with Ethereum that not having a value statement and allowing the community to kind of rally around the technology is more like the future? And I'm asking that in the context of, if you look at Ethereum's market share and, probably how it's lost market share, just would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think like Ethereum definitely does have specific values, right? And I think like it doesn't make sense any other way, right? Because if you want to maximize TPS, you get a server, right? And so I think it's like the thing that we should not do, right? I think we should not like come to the conclusion that we need to, like stop caring about like being decentralized or being open source or trying to you know like support public goods and like all of the different things that people care about. Though at the same time, I think it's also true that like Ethereum is definitely not like a cult with a Bible, right? Like it's not like there isn't one single place where it's all written down of like like what are the thou shalts and what are the thou shalts not, and that's like healthy and that's the way that things should be, right? I think the place for that's like the play or the right way to approach this that sort of thing is, right? I think that like what we want, for example, is we want like applications that actually have good trust properties, right? And like for example, one of the nice like one-line tests for that is the walk-away test, right? If the developers permanently disappear, can users still get their money out? Do users still have something that's useful? And there are lots of applications that fail the walk-away test, right? And if like the best way to do this is like actually to like primarily focus on the positive approach, right? And like basically say, look, we'll actually help people improve. If there are specific technical bits of doing that are hard, then like actually, like get together the developers and like actually build those technical bits in such a way that like once they're built once, they become easier for anyone else to adopt, right? I mean, even Ethereum itself, like basically was an example of that spirit, right? Because you create a chain, and then once you've created the chain, everyone else only needs to worry about writing the program, right? So there, like there's a lot of work on the infrastructure side, where like basically the thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to push all of the responsibility to developers, and especially you don't want to like push responsibility for doing things that involve deep tech to people whose specialty is not deep tech, right? It's like there's always like industrial structures that can avoid that, right? And that can like basically specialize it away in such a way that most people don't need to worry about that. And that's like, I think like that kind of positive approach is the thing that we should be moving towards, right? So like open source continues to be super important. Interoperability continues to be important. Security continues to be important, and like building applications that have like some kind of long-term sustainability, I think continues to be important. And like, I think we should not give up on those things. And I think, we should keep focusing on those things, though I think there is also this like much more supportive way that like basically involves really going through like the different pieces of the stack and basically asking like how do we make it easier for people to do the right thing is something that like we as a as a community, as of each and every like developers, researchers, everyone can really step up much more on. Mm-hmm.
What aspect of the technology that you've spent the last years working on are you most proud of?
What aspect of the technology? I think realistically, still the proof of stake switch. I mean, like, no longer consuming a quarter of the world's electricity is friggin' awesome.
No, that was, I mean, obviously the proof of stake switch was like an unbelievable pirouette. Like seeing a system that decentralized and that complex was pretty wild. So congratulations to you and everybody involved. In terms of like what I've been working on, I think we one of the things that we did when we decided that we were going to build our own blockchain was to rethink everything, and that included EVM, and I owe so much to Solidity, having done CryptoKitties and Solidity, but also Cheese Wizards after that, and just like what an unbelievable capability to be able to write software that runs on a completely decentralized computer. And to touch on Vitalik's last point, like there's not a day that goes by that I'm not thankful that CryptoKitties is going to be here 100 years from now, right? And that's partially because of what I did, but that's partially because of what a whole lot of other people did, and what this gentleman here did. And so I think that's really incredible. And so for me to step away from Solidity was like it was a big deal. And we wrote a language called Cadence, which was based on some research out of Carnegie Mellon in terms of applying linear types in the blockchain context. And it turns out that linear types are just such a really good fit for tracking value and managing rights, access rights, and security, that it made for a really big difference. And I don't know, it's always appealing. It's always enjoyable to me to talk to people in our ecosystem and talk to them about their experience writing Cadence, because certainly the people on staff, whenever we ask them to spend time in Solidity, they're never very happy about it. But it's good to see people in our community really excited about it. And so, I think a Cadence would be my answer. Yeah.
Last question, I'm sorry.
I'll keep it super tight. So getting back to the original question that kind of kicked off the entire discussion here, we were looking at pro-social, behavior, but the dynamic tension of systems that are actually popular and kind of take off, right? And there's unfortunate, kind of human behaviors and reactions that lead to those things. And I was curious about if there was this perspective of maybe DIAC has some like levers of opportunity to crack at this. We look at, for example, GLP-1s like, Ozempic, Wegovy, whatnot. Not only is it for weight loss, but it also has these secondary behaviors of reducing kind of, human behaviors that require usually a little bit more thought and action. And then I'm kind of curious as well, like, are there perhaps other technical augmentations or whatnot to help us expand Dunbar's number or whatnot, so we can help to remember the human that's on the other side of these social media feeds that we're finding ourselves in?
Yeah, I don't have much to say other than that. I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that it doesn't feel like it's humans that we're interacting with, and I think something like Twitter makes it even worse because it's such a short medium. Yeah. So yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.